In this video, I'll talk about the most important element that makes photography possible: light. I'll explore different types of light and how it can transform your images, and I will also share some tips and some mistakes that you want to avoid along the way. There are two quotes from Ansel Adams that at their core, at their essence, talk about light. A good photograph is knowing where to stand. Or sometimes I do get to places just when God's ready to have somebody click the shutter. Both of these quotes talk about light. Light is the decisive element, is the element that makes you click the shutter. Now let's talk about different types of light. Natural light is a photographer's best friend. It's the easiest light to encounter because it's everywhere around us. But sometimes it's tricky to master it. So if you want to make the best of every situation as a photographer, you need to master the understanding of light, because you can't change natural light. It's there and you have to know how to use it in order to take great photos. Number one, the best natural light possible, it's golden hour. Now golden hour, as the name suggests, you can think of it as an hour before sunset and an hour after sunrise. It's not necessarily 1 hour, it depends on the season and your location, but you get the idea. If you are photographing within this hour, you're going to get longer shadows, lower contrast, and you're going to have those lovely orange, reddish tints on your subjects. This is the perfect moment if you are a landscape photographer or also a portrait photographer. It enhances the skin color. It enhances the landscape, the colors of fall, the colors of the snow if you're photographing in winter. Everything is looking like a fairy tale if you want. The second type of light is blue hour. Now the name says blue hour, but it's not 1 hour. It's in the hour after sunset or in the hour before sunrise. It's those moments when the sky, it's not fully black, it still has some blue in it, and it has deeper dark shades of blue. And if you're photographing, for example, landscapes in winter, you're going to see those shades of blue really well because the snow will reflect this type of light, and you will have some eerie and dramatic and really beautiful scenes. Now, this type of light is perfect to photograph cityscapes because at this moment you also have details in the sky, but you also get the lights in the city, and you are capturing a magic moment if you want. The third type of light, overcast light. This is happening when you're having clouds all over the sky, and the clouds are acting like a really huge diffuser. Then the shadows are really soft, and you can't necessarily see a true direction of light, although the direction of light can be visible in some elements. This is the perfect moment to photograph portraits because you have even light and you still get some really thin and low contrast shadows that you can control really easily. It's the perfect moment if you're a landscape photographer to photograph inside the forest. If you're photographing in the forest in a day when the sun is up in the sky, you're going to get all those patchy areas of light that don't look interesting. But now you're having even light, and there's a light. It's a type of light that kind of floods the forest, and it can create really beautiful and interesting images. The fourth type of light is harsh light or midday light. This type of light is characterized by having deep, dark shadows, and the contrast is really big. The differences between the highlights and the shadows are really great in terms of stops of light, and that is why some cameras have problems in capturing the entire dynamic range and in only one photo. And even in this type of light, you can have some really interesting opportunities. If you're photographing portraits, you can look for buildings that either block the light of the sun completely, and now you're having a uniform light on your subject, or you can use buildings to reflect the light on the face of the subject. You can also use elements inside cities that filter this type of light and then sometimes create beams of light, or let only part of the light to pass, and you're having the subject in that spotlight, in that area of light, and you can create some contrasty and beautiful images. If you are a landscape photographer, some people are afraid of photographing in the middle of the day. If I'm in the perfect location, and the perfect location for me for the midday is, for example, in the Dolomites, where there are so many peaks and you get areas of shadow and darkness and light, and this alternation between these two elements can really create some beautiful and spectacular black and white images. And the last type of natural light, before I talk about some mistakes when approaching light and photography, is stormy and foggy situations. These two types are, let's say, something that can happen in any day. But when you get stormy light, you have a part of the sky covered by storm clouds, and then you get to have a place from where the sun is shining its light through those clouds. And those moments are really great. They're dramatic, they offer great contrast, and they're really spectacular. The other type, foggy situation, it's perfect to photograph inside the forest. It's not a situation when you want to photograph on top of the mountain, because the only thing you see is fog in front of you. But if you are in the forest, you are going to get some really nice images that you can relate them to fairy tales if you want. And now let's quickly talk about 6 mistakes that you can do in approaching light. 1, you can overexpose in harsh light. When you have deep and big contrast between the highlights and the shadows, I always prefer to conserve details in the highlights and take the shadows even to completely black. Mistake number 2 is underexposing in low light. The problem with this is when you're going to want to increase the exposure, depending on the camera that you're having and the sensor, you're going to have lots of noise. That's why if you have to increase the ISO in a low light situation, make sure the exposure is okay. You don't need to drag it even more to expose it even more. Mistake number 3 is ignoring the white balance. Now you can set the white balance in camera or in Lightroom, but you need to not forget about it. If you're photographing, for example, the blue hour in winter, you want to have those blue tints. You want to have that blue feeling. If you're going to use a shade white balance in a situation like that, then you will probably get rid of most of the blue and you're not going to have that feeling. Again, if you're going to use another white balance that can take the oranges of the golden hour and shift them more towards blue, then again you lose that feeling of golden hour. So white balance is really important. Mistake number 4 is not paying attention to the shadows. Sometimes, especially in harsh light, the shadows are really short and can create some artifacts that are not pleasant to look at, so make sure you pay attention to the shadows. Mistake number 5 is not exposing for light. Usually I'm looking for scenes where I'm having darkness, I'm sitting in the darker area and I'm photographing towards light, and you always expose for that area of light. And mistake number 6 is not placing your subject in light. The area of light will attract the most attention, so it makes sense to have the subject over there and to also expose for the light and create a contrast and have an image that represents something and talks about a subject. Now, if you want to learn more about landscape photography, I have an ebook on my website. I also have a workshop/photo tour in Tuscany next year, and people are already starting to join the list for that workshop. So if you want to learn more about landscape photography, There's a link to my website in the description of this video. And until next time, keep on photographing because it's the only way that you can get better. Bye bye.